right now. They cool right now. They cool right now. Okay, right now. Okay, let me introduce him right. They introduce him right. Now, I met this brother on 75th King Drive. I was on my way to the Air Candy set. For those that know who EC is, they got the longest running sports set in the city. I was a part of it. I'm by myself now, but that's okay. Anyway, they are the ones that's going to do the Capoeira demonstration for y'all tonight. You know what I'm saying? For those that don't know what Capoeira is, it is a Brazilian martial art that started in Brazil from our Cuban slaves. He's going to explain more of it when he comes up here. You know what I'm saying? This is my brother. I love him. Gratitude, brother. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate bringing the brothers, man. Without no further ado, are y'all ready for the next time? Give it up for us, Pharaoh. For hello.
Peace and blessings, family.
Word.
How you doing?
What's up, God?
All right. I wanted to discuss Capoeira, give y'all a brief lecture of the history and the dynamics of the African people who were enslaved in Brazil, who were enslaved all over the diaspora. But Brazil, the terrain of Brazil, presented a certain kind of phenomenon that our ancestors were able to take advantage of. Brazil at one point was connected to Africa, okay, Angola. If you look at the coast on both continents, you see that it's like a puzzle fit right there. If you were to fit them together, theoretically, they would fit just like a puzzle. So I say that to say that because Brazil was in, first of all, the southern hemisphere, and it had very similar terrain and temperature as Africa, our ancestors were able to retreat to the hills and do different things like that. Certain opportunities they had that we didn't have here in America with this more so European terrain. It's more like Europe and North America. So dealing with Capoeira, it is an African martial art, okay, that comes from Brazil via the transatlantic slave trade, which was initiated by the Portuguese in the 1440s. Okay, the Portuguese kicked off a battle with Queen Nzinga in Angola, or the ancient word Indango, later renamed to Angola once the Portuguese took it over. They fought 40 years, and they won. They were beating the Portuguese 40 years consistently. And they got one major battle to their win, and that's when they started to take our ancestors as slaves and basically prisoners of war. So going through the transatlantic slave trade, they started to develop the jingle at the bottom of the slave ships. They started to jingle with the shackles on, okay, and go through the fundamental movements, which would later become jingle and capoeira. So within Brazil, there were a different kind of mindset with the slave traders. When I say different, I'm speaking in terms of the slave trade, the different mentality when it came to breaking slaves, okay, breaking Africans who you just made prisoners of war and then taking them into a level of enslavement. The British had a much different way. British were a lot more cruel in the sense that they didn't allow certain cultural expressions for African people to have. In Brazil, because these Portuguese were mainly adventurers, single men, you know, players, ballers, you know, whatever you want to call it today, the terminology for today, or modern day terminology, they were more so on a kicking it type of vibe. Okay, with the British slave trade in America, they brought their families with them. It was more of a serious enterprise. That's why they actually rose to. They were actually the last to get involved in the slave trade, which the Portuguese initiated, and they were able to make the greatest profits from the slave trade because of the serious mindset. They say these niggas cannot get into no drums, they cannot play any African instruments, they cannot get into any African dances, or they'll be lynched. Okay, so that was a very strict policy because they were very serious. They had a lot more going for them. Family there, so if they mess around and give one of our ancestors a certain amount of freedom, you know, culturally, they look up and they whole damn family is dead because they didn't found a loophole in their slave system to come up and, you know, rebel, to revolt. And that's exactly what happened in Brazil, because they were so lenient. And not to say that they were not cruel. They were cruel bastards, just like any slave master, any slave person, you know, any enslaver of another person. Very cruel, but they just had a certain lax to them. So they allowed certain cultural expressions to be done in the plantation. And that's how capoeira emerged, because it was disguised as a dance. Okay, it was disguised as an African dance, and it was a martial arts application that was added to it. Once the slave master turned his head, they start kicking and everything. They turn back and look at them, they dancing, they doing cartwheels, they doing backflips, they doing theatrical expressions, you know, of movement and culture. But once you move, because it was already built into capoeira, into the fundamental footwork, rhythm, and patterns, to throw kicks, to throw punches, to throw all kind of devastating blows, they were able to, you know, disguise it successfully until a rebellion took place. And rebellion usually took place on a holiday or a time where they was drinking a lot of cachaça. That's one big drink in Brazil. It's called cachaça. Okay, and it's made out of, anybody know? Sugar cane. That's the biggest export out of Brazil during the colonial times was sugar cane. So they had our ancestors with machetes cutting down sugar cane. Sugar cane was like cotton in North America. Okay, and the biggest buyer of sugar cane from Brazil was the Queen of England, and she actually consumed so much sugar cane that she rotted all her teeth out. So that just gives you an example of the necessity that Europe had for our people being enslaved and cutting sugar canes and doing all kind of stuff like that to empower, to enrich them. Okay, so you had what we'll call quilombos. All right, a lot of people like to make a comparison between the quilombos and the Underground Railroad. Now, you can do that just to get a fundamental understanding, but it was a totally different way of getting free, getting yourself free. On one hand, you had the Underground Railroad that dealt mainly with Europeans setting up their houses, okay, sympathetic Europeans who saw slavery as a wrong in their society, and they put themselves on the line to help a lot of our people, you know, get up north and become re-enslaved under a different kind of policy. Quilombos is different, okay. Quilombos, it had nothing to do with Europeans. Europeans didn't supply the houses, they didn't put up any of the houses, anything like that. It was a way that it was a travel route. Okay, once they successfully won the rebellion on the plantation, they went up north. Okay, they went into the rainforest where the Portuguese had a major problem getting into. And I was just talking to a capoeira master last week about this, and he was explaining it to me. He gave me some angles that I didn't know myself, you know. And one of them was the quilombo itself was a big mountain. It was big, like a pyramid. Okay, and in the back of it, you could not get up. You had to climb like hundreds of feet up. So that was in a sense a death trap to those who, you know what I'm saying, were not used to climbing up mountains, which the Europeans were not. And they only had one central route inside the quilombo, and they would set up ambush positions. So when the police would come there, they call them policia or whatever, which is another term that's coming from slavery and the plantation and the overseer and that whole thing. Overseer, officer. Okay, that's why you got the police officer, overseer. So it's just a perpetuation of slavery. So in this case, they would try to go and get the Africans who would successfully beat them, okay, and try to retake them as slaves. And they would go and they would run into all kind of problems because the Europeans were not used to going into rainforest situations. You know, you got the Sun Belt right there. Brazil is right on the equator. Okay, the quilombos was all these palm trees. Okay, and these palm trees set up a lot of ways they couldn't see. They couldn't see right into there, so they'd go up in there, and it was just a death trap. So you had one leader and the first capoeira master of Brazil called Zumbi dos Palmares. Okay, dos Palmares meaning of the palms, because you got the quilombos with quilombos dos Palmares. Okay, so you had the quilombo, which was the hill or the big pyramid, the big mountain, and then you had the palm trees that was around, and you only had one central way to get inside the quilombos. And the Africans used this kind of freedom once they got into the quilombos to develop more capoeira, to develop more of the music, to develop more of the ritual aspects of this martial art that's disguised as a dance. And a lot of it, when people see it, they think it's choreographed. It's not really choreographed. Is that you train the escapes, you train the kicks, you train the movements to such a level where when you get in there and you start going with someone, it looks like it's choreographed. Okay, that's just the beauty of capoeira. And another thing I wanted to discuss that's important to me, you have a lot of different martial arts. You got karate, taekwondo, kung fu, all these different arts. And most of them that are being pumped up to us as African people are Asian martial arts. Now, if you go and do your own research, all the martial arts come from African people, okay, or original people, okay, developed even past what we now know as Kemet. But to go to a historical source, you have on the tombs of Beni Hassan in northern Kemet, or Egypt, if you know what Kemet is. Kemet is a name for that land before the Greeks came in. Just like the Portuguese did in Brazil, named Brazil, which is after a tree. The Greeks came and named Egypt, named Kemet, Egypt. So they just put their name on that, okay? So within the martial arts, we must understand as African people that they all come from us. What's special about capoeira is that it ties you in with your African culture, ties you in with your black self more so. Give you an example. I grew up doing martial arts, mainly Asian martial arts, and after a certain amount of time, I wanted to be more like a Chinese person or a Japanese person. You know, I wanted to get more into that reality, you know, hanging around them and that kind of thing. And I had to pull myself back, like, hold on, man, what are you doing? You know, you go to Chinatown, and I see black people, not just myself, go to Chinatown, and there's a certain level of prejudice there. There's a certain level of racism that's there, and there's a certain level of appreciation, because all of them come from us, the Chinese. They did a study in 2008. They took blood from people in all 48 provinces of China, a direct DNA link back to Africa. All of the Chinese, 48 provinces, like their states, 48 states, if you will, all come from us. So going there and you know, experiencing Chinatown with that kind of mindset really wasn't the best. So I had to pull myself back. I said, now I love martial arts, but what is a martial art I can do that would tie me into my ancestry a lot more so than doing wushu or doing karate and things like this. And these martial arts are great martial arts. I'm not trying to downgrade Asian martial arts or what's now today seen or known as Asian martial arts. I'm just trying to give a perspective that's not really, you know, talked about, especially in capoeira. It's not talked about. Capoeira masters are not going to talk to you like I'm talking to you right now. They're not going to get this real with you, you see, because it's the Brazilian way of life, okay, in terms of revolution, in terms of seeing racial dynamics, there's a certain blind eye that they have, okay, on a mass level, okay. You're talking about racial things, and it's like they shut down. They don't want to really engage you on that level, or build, or come to some understanding, or you know, move forward with a certain intention based off with what you just built upon. So when I found capoeira, I was like, and I did the research on it. I did the history, and I did my own information. I said, this is a perfect martial art. It has African instruments, okay, it's African music. The songs are in Portuguese, okay, that's the national language of Brazil. But a lot of the songs have the African or the Yoruba dialect. And let me say this, you have 5 primary nations that were enslaved in Brazil that led to capoeira being what it is today. You have the Bantu, okay, coming from the Angola region, or Ndango region, which was the name before, Angola and Ndango. So you have Bantu, Yoruba, Igbo, Fulani, and the Mandingo peoples, for the most part, who were enslaved in Brazil, and they had to mix their energy, they had to mix their dances, they had to mix their martial arts systems, and they had to come to something that was new. So when people say capoeira is Brazilian, it is to the degree that it was formed, it was developed in Brazil, but all of the roots of capoeira come from what we now know as Africa, okay? And from there, it was used to liberate a lot of our people, okay? Are there any questions? Maybe I didn't cover everything. Anybody curious to anything dealing with capoeira or African history in martial arts? Yes, sir.
Did you say Ubuntu?
The Bantu people.
Bantu?
Bantu.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Did you say Muntu?
I said Ubuntu because that's
Okay.
the name of that Linux operating system designed by Africans.
Okay.
I thought that you were connecting that to Capoeira. I was wanting to hear about that. That's what was going on.
Now, what region of Africa are they from?
Oh no, I was talking about the Linux operating system named after
Okay.
Africans
Okay.
that's used across the world right now.
What's the name of it again?
Ubuntu. It's an operating system that's free, that's given to that's designed in Africa. That's been used across over the world over Windows.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. Now, the Africans that developed that technology, right?
Yes.
Where are they from in Africa?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. Sounds like they're more Western Africa, but the Portuguese, by them being the first to enslave our ancestors in modern transatlantic slave operations, they got a lot of our ancestors. They got more than just the 5 I mentioned. They got some other African nations too that they enslaved on the eastern side, on the east coast, the Mozambique region. Okay, and it's so funny that the Portuguese were the first to initiate slavery, but they end up being ruled by the British totally financially. They actually made the least amount of money in slavery. The French made more, the Spanish made more, and the British for damn sure made more on slavery than the Portuguese did. Portugal to this day is still poor. It don't look nothing like Britain. But that's an irony to me. And then they enslaved more Africans than any of the other Europeans. And the slave system went longer than any other of the Europeans.
Right.
In Brazil, initiated 1500 with Pedro Álvares Cabral. Okay, and slavery didn't end. I mean, if you look at the world today, you really got educated out. You see slavery still going on, but it's just under a much more sophisticated system, okay, of operation. That's all it is. But and officially in Brazil, slavery ended 1888. Okay, that's 23 years after slavery supposedly ended in America, 1865. Okay, Cuba with the Spanish slave trade ended 1868. Okay, so Brazil was the last official ending of slavery. Okay, and if you go there today, you still see Negroes enslaved today. Okay, just under a different system. So let me move from the lecture. No one else has any questions? Anybody else have any questions? Okay, let's get on this instrument. Now we're gonna play some music. All right, we're gonna do a 5-minute music set. But before we get into the sounds and everything, let's get into the education. Okay. Let's get into the education of what these instruments are and what role they play in capoeira. All right, this is called the berimbau. Could everyone repeat after me? Berimbau. 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 All right. Now, this is another. Remember I told y'all, I said if you was talking to a capoeira master, they would say certain things. This is another one I'm about to mention right now. Now, berimbau is the correct name for this instrument. However, it's the Portuguese name for the instrument because in Portugal they have bridges, and on the bridges they have like a bow on the bridge. And when they sing the berimbau, which is an African instrument, they related it to something that they know in Portugal on their bridges. Okay, so they call it berimbau from something that was European, or based in their European locality. So the original name, because this instrument comes from Central Africa, comes from the Congo region. It's called urukungu. That's the actual name. Urukungu. Urukungu. One more time. Urukungu. That's the exact name for this instrument. If you deal with the actual history, the actual African dynamics of capoeira and everything like that. Capoeira, for example, is not a Portuguese name. It's a Tupi Guarani name. It's a native Brazilian name. Before it was called capoeira in Africa, it was called Ngolo. Okay, that was the original name for capoeira before it became what it is today in Brazil and everything. It was Ngolo. Okay, we're dealing with the roots of the art form, the music. So next to the berimbau, urukungu, is agogo. Okay, agogo. African cowbell. Can anyone say agogo, please? Agogo. Okay, agogo. The Brazilian tambourine is called pandeiro. 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 is the Brazilian tambourine. And there's another, what is it? There you go. What's the other word? Because if you ask most capoeira masters, most of y'all capoeira masters, you say, what is that instrument? Oh, berimbau. So you got to know both of them. Berimbau, urucumbu, to deal with the ancestral origins and names, because that's very important. You know, we don't want to get so caught up into something that we ignore the roots of it. We got to deal with the roots. That's where the foundation, that's where the strength and the power is, in the foundation of these names, knowing the proper names, okay, and knowing the history of it. That's why, before we get off into any martial arts, we got to have a discussion. You know, we got to have an educational discussion. That's why I invite your comments, whatever comments you may have, or questions. You know, you can make them now, if you like, or whenever. The other instrument, the last instrument here is called atabaque. Look like a conga drum, and it is a conga drum, but in capoeira, the drum is called atabaque. Atabaque. All right, so we getting ready to start. I want to make one more comment. There's a brother here that teaches another African martial art. Okay, it's a straight African martial art, and he may or may not do a demonstration with us here, but I wanted to bring that acknowledgement. Brother, if you can please come on up, brother. If you can make mention of your art and the origins of it and everything like that, that would be great.
Right. So the style that I do is called Ciências de Estoma. And something familiar to capoeira is it actually originated in Louisiana, in the fact that all the slaves from where they were in Africa was brought to Louisiana. They combined and created what we call Ciências de Estoma. Ciências de Estoma is really comprised of 3 styles. One of them is very familiar to capoeira. They have the same roots, Ngolo. That's one of them. Dambe, that's the 5th style. And we have Lam, which is wrestling style. So yeah, these 3 styles mix into what we call Ciências de Estoma. And that's how it came about. There's it's very rhythmic also, but it's very use the entire body, like capoeira too, you know, but fists are very involved, elbows are very involved, a lot of that stuff is very involved in it. All grappling, all that. It's very familiar to capoeira, so they're really, to me, brother styles, or sister styles, whatever you want to call them. If you guys have any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer also. Ciências de Estoma. The literal translation is Creole, and the literal translation means instinct. So it's to fight off of instinct. You train yourself so much that everything you do becomes instinct. If somebody grabs you, that's an instinct. If somebody strikes you, that's an instinct to react the way you do. Ciências de Estoma means instinct.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, you said in the ground fighting in three different categories. You got the fist, the leg movement, and the ground. Is the ground, is it similar to the Asian martial arts of like jiu-jitsu or aikido?
They have some. They're similar. They're similar in the fact that they do grapple. Okay. The grapples are really made to. Well, yeah, they have premiers. They break, they take down, and in short, not a lot of instances, but some instances they restrain. Since the Estoma, there's really no restraining in it. It's actually meant for destruction. The moment the combat starts, no one stops until the combat ends, meaning somebody can't go on anymore.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Okay, when you say restrain, do you mean like put him in a hole where like choking or put him in breathing mechanism in his throat?
Right.
Okay. That's what I want to ask.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can I ask what kind of training techniques do you use to implement instinct into somebody?
That's a great question.
I don't know, can you?
Good question.
Okay, but yes, there's something called muscle memory. And muscle memory is when you do something so much, it actually becomes ingrained into your muscle. That's why they call it muscle memory. The simple act of punching, you know, somebody who just doesn't punch at all, might come in the street and start hitting you, your reaction may not be to strike back. It may be to, you know, cower, retreat, anything else. Somebody else with muscle memory, you know, that's muscle memory. That's the strike, block and attack. So, you know, it's all, that's how you do it. It's training and it's drilling.
So doing it over and over again until it becomes second nature.
Right.
this instrument.
Say that one more time, brother.
Where the harp, the piano, okay, because you got the strings in the piano. It's just the harp turned sideways. Okay, you got the harp, piano, violin, bass, cello. All of your major string instruments come from this instrument, and the string comes out of the car tire. Okay, and the inside of the car tire, you got all of these kind of strings called arami and capoeira, arami, and you got all the other pieces. Yes, sir.
I got a question for you, man. I'm an audio engineer, and I've come across many a different instrument. Tell me, how would you mic that?
How would I mic it?
Yeah, where would you put
Well,
the
I can clip. I can clip a mic here. I can clip a mic here because the sound all comes out of the kabasa or the gourd. So this is the sound box of the instrument. So I'm able to make variations of sound from pulling it away from my stomach. Okay. All right, so now you all can stand up and move back.
Actually, stand up and put your chairs to the wall. Right.
Yes.
We all roll and get. They done. I'm glad nobody get hit.